Hey, and welcome back to episode 4 of Big Little Ladies. This is your co host, Caitlin, and I'm here with my roommate and friend, Mac.
Hello.
And we are so excited to finally get to wrap up season 1 of Big Little Lies.
And start season 2, which, by the way, we're almost at the end of. How did episode 7 get here so fast, you guys? It's coming up this Sunday.
It is getting so heavy. Mac and I cannot, we have both been like in a mild, just like, not funk, but like, it's like been a thinking funk. I've just been thinking about that because it has put me in this like, what's gonna, like, I have to know what's gonna
Last night's episode was, well, not last night's, we watched it last night, but last Sunday's episode was just freaking insane, you guys. Like, what? For those of you who haven't seen it yet, like, get on it. But we're very excited to talk about that in a few episodes. But for now, let's go back to episode You Get What You Need, right? Episode 7, season 1, which was supposed to be the very last episode of the whole series.
Right.
And, you know, with just a little bit of room for a little bit something more in the end, kind of created and paved this way for what we see now as season 2, and of course what we're going to see as season 3.
Before we get into the summary of episode 7, is there anything you want to recap about our last episode, or any like main themes?
So Burning Love was our last episode, right? It was Jane learned that Saxon Baker was not the rapist, right? Madeline basically like attempted to convince Jane to just kind of give up the search for him, and then we had the whole petition with Jane and Ziggy getting suspended, Renata getting her eye basically nearly gouged out by Jane, you know, and then of course later on we see that Perry tries to initiate sex with Celeste and she hurts him pretty badly. You know, and then basically we get that really scary moment that we see that Celeste is lucky that Perry didn't kill her. And I think that's what I'd like to end on recapping, because the next episode actually starts back with Perry and Celeste, and it took watching that last episode for the second time for me to realize what the sound mixers really did there. For you guys who don't really know much about what, like, the technicality of movies, sound mixing, that's the reason that you hear, you know, loud sounds when the character's hearing loud sounds, and when the conversations are quiet, when the characters' conversations are quiet. It's also the reason that you hear the mixing of sounds. Like, for example, that episode 7, You Get What You Need, it opens with us looking at a window, right? We're looking through a vent, basically, and we expect it to be like a bathroom window. That's what it kind of looks like. And we hear the battering, we hear someone getting beaten.
Someone screaming.
Right, and we also hear tapping, right? And for the longest time, I didn't understand what the tapping was, in fact, because once you kind of zoom into the bathroom and you get into the actual scene of the beating, you kind of forget the tapping ever happened. Right, which is genius. It's what they want you to think, because later on in that episode, we're going to have a flashback of one of the twins being downstairs playing video games, i.e. the tapping, and one of them has headphones and one of them doesn't. So that sound mixing in the very beginning is literally telling us, okay, the twins are hearing what's going on upstairs, and what's going on upstairs is not fucking pretty.
And they did a really good job of showing that only one of the twins was really listening. That really helped with the rest of the episode, which we're gonna cover, but it was a lot of foreshadowing.
It was, and I really appreciated that they did that, because it shows, like, you know, one of the things that I really highly disagree with Jane is I don't believe violence runs in anyone's blood. I really don't. I believe that violence is something that is conditioned into us, just like anything else. And, you know, it doesn't matter if the kids don't see mom scream. If they hear the scream of a woman and the only people present in their house are mom and dad, then on some subconscious level, especially if the child is between the ages of 0 and 8, on some subconscious level, they're going to think that that's a thing that's okay to do. And I love in that episode, even when Celeste, we're gonna hit it a little bit later, but when Celeste finds out that it's Max, and we see her confront him, and it's actually, I was really weary of that scene on the first time around watching it, because as a nanny, I mean, I've made my mistakes as a nanny, like before I was emotionally aware the way that I am today, I don't know, I would put kids on timeout and kind of like not really have the kind of compassion that I think I should have. And I love how Celeste really just urges to Max that he's still a good boy, that there's, like, it's not his fault that he's been taught something that isn't okay. And, I think that at the end of the day, the way she comes at him is why he confesses to doing it in the first place, and why we hear of him never really doing it again.
Mm-hmm. Right, and they show at the end of her beating scene Max running into the bedroom and Perry stopping him from getting to see Celeste, and he was obviously downstairs. He probably heard and ran up and wanted to see his mom, make sure she was okay. And then the next scene, it goes to Jane and Ziggy.
Right, and Ziggy's sick, right, or quote sick.
Yeah.
And he's playing sick, of course, and Jane, I love, oh my gosh, the writing is, like, the writing brings in some really beautiful light of conscious parenting. Like, I love how Jane, she doesn't come at Ziggy like, well, I think you're lying. I think you're not really sick, and you just don't want to go to school because kids don't want to play with you. Instead, she just very gently goes, well, is it a possibility that what hurts here is actually your heart and your body's okay? And I love that, because it's not like Ziggy's okay. He's not okay.
No.
But there's, but of course he doesn't have a cold either. And so
right.
That's a beautiful way of Jane not going, oh my God, like, what a liar, don't lie, you know what I mean? But just going, I get what you're doing here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she definitely did a very good job handling that type of situation, and also she sort of had to pry a little bit, convince him to tell her who was bullying him about it, because he did tell her that he knew who it was, but he wasn't willing to say.
Right.
And instead of, being like, you have to tell me, you have to say it, she was like, well, you don't have to say it, you can write it down.
Or you can point at the picture.
Yeah, right. You can point at the person.
And I thought that was genius, because, I mean, I honestly, out of all the mothers, I respect the shit out of Jane. Not like the most, but just, she's the one that literally came from nothing and was handed a child of rape. And she is literally, like, it makes me, like, emotional to think about of how great of a mother she is, and she could have been the worst.
Right. And so, soon after that, Jane has to tell Celeste, and that conversation too, she did a really, really great job of not, telling Celeste in a way that would upset her, because obviously Celeste, I think you could tell in the scene that she wasn't in the best place, and the way that she went about it was, she said, hey, I've really considered that my son might be lying. I've considered, how he was brought into this world, what, I've considered all the different options, but I really believe that this is what's happening. And it totally makes sense. And Celeste knows it. As soon as she says it, she was like, yeah.
Yeah. And I love that line where Celeste, what's it called? Jane goes, maybe sometimes they grow out of it, and Celeste goes, sometimes they don't.
Right. Her zinger one-liners.
Dude, some one-liners are just great in the show. Like, what was the other one? You're a really big person. We'll get to that, but at the end of the episode, then when Renata's apologizing, because basically at the gala she finds out that Ziggy was the culprit, or wasn't the culprit, and Madeline's very drunk, and this is before the whole ordeal at the end with Perry, and just, you're a really big person.
Yeah, it's like, it's really hard to apologize like that, Renata. You're a really big person.
The one-liners are absolutely great. So before we even get to Jane telling Celeste, though, Jane tells Madeline. Madeline's the one who tells her, you need to tell Celeste.
Right.
And while she's talking in Tom's coffee shop, Tom's, right, the coffee shop owner, and they're in their little general coffee shop, and while they're talking together, who comes in the door and starts to literally threaten Jane, right? Gordon.
Yeah, Renata's husband.
Which, at this point, Jane has been to Renata's house. Jane has apologized. They've made peace, basically, the two of them, Renata and Jane. And at this point, like, I don't think they meant it to be like this, but I think this is almost a little bit of foreshadowing of the fact that Gordon just isn't much of a reliable character.
Yeah, they definitely wanted to build. I think they use that as a character build because you really don't know that much about him. You know, he's kind of opposite Renata and like
Very chill and laid back.
right, but you're not exactly sure what he does or like how he is able to be laid back. You know, she's a CEO.
Lawyer. I think they're both lawyers.
Lawyers,
But I don't know what kind of law he practices.
right. They never really like developed him, but they are developing him like in a character, and they continue to do that later on. But it's like definitely helpful to see now, like, exactly who he is, and I think they definitely did that for a reason.
I did too, and I mean just the way he came into the coffee shop, the hostility with which he was talking to Jane, and granted, Jane even said this later on in the episode. She did, in his defense, she did try to gouge Renata's eye out. But it's definitely a little, I would say, a sign of someone who's maybe a little bit slightly unhinged to, verbally attack a person that's already apologized to your wife. Also that, that really isn't causing any trouble any longer. It was just, I felt it was really unnecessary, and it gave us, like I said, I don't know if they knew they were going to have a second season at this point.
Right.
But it really gives us a sign into this whole season 2, which, by the way, if you guys aren't watching it, okay, spoiler alert.
It's kind of Renata-centric.
Like, it's a lot of Renata-centric, but a lot of it, too, is the fact that her husband ends up, like, gambling all their money away. And so I think that's, like, looking in hindsight, that's a really great scene for him. But I think initially the whole purpose of that scene was to get Tom a chance to impress Jane so Jane would have a date to the gala. So I think it was, like, I think they thought maybe, like, this is great to throw Gordon in here, but I think the scene was more so for that.
Right, and if they were thinking ahead to the second episode, then they needed to put Gordon in a little. They needed some scenes with him. So, and that's true. The date, Jane's date.
And oh my god, another great one-liner. I thought you were gay. Poor Tom, you guys. Okay. So.
Okay, well.
Moving on.
Okay, so I know Celeste. Obviously Celeste she is a big part of this episode, but they kind of show her talking to her therapist about getting a new apartment. And then before she meets Jane to talk about Max, she's stocking the fridge. She'd been beaten up, so she's like struggling really hard. And cleaning everything to bring the boys there. When Perry leaves, she told her therapist that
he's leaving in the morning.
Yeah, that he's leaving in the morning, and that she was gonna move them out. And then when she was getting ready to go to this party that Perry was in town for, still.
Wait, before we get to that, can we? Because the moment goes from a really sweet moment to the moment you're about to talk about, right? The moment where Max says he has a loose tooth, and she goes, "Oh, it's your turn now," and you don't really catch it because it's not really a close-up on Max's face, but you catch it in Nicole Kidman's reaction that he's afraid that he's not a good boy. Like, I feel so sad for him. Like, I want to cry because it's really sad. Like, it's really sad that him emulating his dad's abuse, like, leads to him doing something so terrible that at such a young age he, like, honestly thinks he doesn't deserve, like, money from the Tooth Fairy, you know?
Right.
And I love that Celeste just goes up to him and she's like, you are still a good boy. Like, the Tooth Fairy's gonna come for you, just like she comes for everybody else. Like, it's not about that. And then instantly, as you were saying,
Perry walks in and he just literally puts a stake through everyone's heart. He, like, tells Celeste that her apartment,
her landlord or her
texted her about her apartment.
Her real estate broker, whatever the hell it was.
And so, everyone just finds out, oh, like, now he knows. And so you just have no idea, they're leaving together, what's going to happen.
Dude, I mean, you think she's going to die. I thought she was going to die.
Her face, she looks scared for her life.
Right. And I mean, honestly, like, can we just say how genius of a reaction shot that was? Because for a few guys out there, I know Caitlin's new to the world of, like, technically making films and stuff like that, but she's watched stuff with me long enough now that, like, it's pretty easy once you learn. The best shows are built on those shots. The best shows, you cannot look down at your phone because you're gonna miss just the reaction of the key character in that moment.
Right. True. Especially in the finale yesterday, like all of the heart-wrenching, like moving parts were these crazy action shots that you have to like.
And it was mixed in with the crashing of the waves and mixed in with the piano
and those like happy music during like really tough scenes, and it just fucked with your emotions. You're like, what is going on?
We're just like, well, they knew what they were doing, right? So, okay, so great. Now we know that Perry knows, and I mean, of course, all of us are going, Celeste, why in the fucking hell is your phone not in your purse?
Right, or like on mute, or like
something, like, I don't,
well,
I mean,
landlord.
Not even mute, but like, I think Perry wouldn't be past looking at her phone.
Probably
you know what I mean?
not.
I feel like at this point, she really should be keeping that shit on lockdown.
Put it in as like babysitter or something. Like, just there's so many.
I know there were so many ways. Like, it could have been like her name could have been Madeline.
But if it wasn't that, it'd be another thing.
No, 100%. And I think that this really shows that I think Celeste underestimated Perry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think she just thinks he just kind of like has zero intuition, but he does have intuition. It's just his intuition is really dangerous because he doesn't know how to not control his emotions. He doesn't know how to feel his emotions in a healthy manner.
Right. Well, he says in therapy that he feels like Celeste doesn't love him, and it's like, how can, like, of course she does. Like, you know, like, he knows that she doesn't. Like, of course she doesn't. And so it's like, it's hard for.
What do you mean she doesn't? Well, I mean, I do feel she loves him, but there's no respect between the two of them.
I mean, that she doesn't, like, you, I mean, someone who's beating you.
No, of course, yeah. Like there's not, it's
like
not entirely.
Right, like, she doesn't really, whatever, and that's obviously his own insecurity because he knows that he's beating her.
Right, like, he feels like she's, like, in spite of, like, she doesn't love him enough to stay. Like, that relationship really made me think of something that my mom taught me a long time ago about relationships. She said, honey, there's love and there's respect, but respect always has to come first. Because in Celeste and Perry's relationship really depicts that for me, because it's clear that they do love each other. Like, they have, like, when you see them, like, I'm not talking about the passionate sex post-violence, but I'm talking, like, in the beginning of the series, you know, when you see those genuinely happy moments, when you see how she looks at him taking care of the kids, it's like, there was a love there, but if there's not a respect for your physical body and for your emotional well-being, it's just a control dynamic that happens to have some love sprinkled in along the way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, at that point, I don't know if it's love
That's
or
true,
if
or if it's just sickness.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
That's my, right. And so.
And I feel like she struggles with that in season 2. Like, I feel like Celeste is struggling in season 2. Is like, did I really love Perry, or was I just, like, addicted to our dynamic?
Right.
So I guess we don't know. You know, you're right. Like, maybe she doesn't love him, but, you know, whatever it is, like, Perry obviously doesn't know where to direct his anger.
It doesn't matter, like, what she would say. Like, he
No.
would still feel like she didn't love him just because he, like, that's his own thing, because he's
Right.
so rough.
And so now we find ourselves on our way to the gala, or actually I think there's a little interlude where we see Gordon and Renata. And Renata's getting ready and Gordon's getting ready. And Gordon basically says, like, let's just blow it off. You know, and Renata's just like, what? No? Okay, so the rich people blow it off. Like, we can't look like that. And it's funny because we kind of,
we
like...
don't need our money, but not our time.
Right. And I kind of, like, I honestly, I feel like that was, looking back, I feel like that was a make or break moment, because that was a moment that they could have decided not to go.
Mm-hmm. It would have been healthier.
But then what would have happened, right? Because next thing that happens, we see Celeste and Perry, instead of getting out of the car at the gala, they keep driving.
Right.
And they keep driving, and there's a fucking cliff, and they stop in front of the cliff. And who technically saves Celeste? Renata and Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
So if they hadn't chosen to go, I
Who
think
knows?
Perry would have fucking driven off that cliff, to be honest, killed them both.
He wouldn't have let her out of the car.
No,
She would
100%
never
no.
be out of his sight, like, again.
No. So Celeste takes the perfect opportunity to just fucking skedaddle out of
Quickly
there.
unlock the door and run.
And run, literally. So now,
We're at the party.
yep, and we have Celeste telling Renata that, and at this point, like, Celeste has gone to, she's gone into the party, and Perry's alone, right? They went in separately, and she's talking to Renata, and Perry sees that she's talking to Renata. And, and in the conversation in the car, Celeste ends up telling Perry that Max is the one who's doing the abuse with Annabella.
Right.
And after Perry is like, well, but how do you know, blah, 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 and Celeste is like, because he admitted to it and Josh said so.
Mm-hmm.
And you see kind of Perry, like, have this terror, but at the same time, it's not a vulnerable terror. It's a terror that could you think she's gonna die until you hear Renata and Gordon knock on the door. So Perry is already weary, right? And seeing her talk to Renata, like, okay, what's obviously about Annabella,
Right.
because it's obviously clear too in their body language. Now, of course, Tori, we got that situation with Madeline and Ed sings like the sweetest song.
Yeah, so 2 people should be featured in some music. What was her name?
Bonnie? Zoe Kravitz?
Zoe Kravitz. Zoe Kravitz did an amazing, like...
Down. She was great.
It was amazing. And so did Ed. He sang the sweetest song to Madeline, and Madeline was a little tipsy.
She had a lot to drink, and...
Which is probably normal.
Yeah, which is probably normal for those things, but also remember her encounter with Joseph earlier on that day, and he was kind of, like, very upset and
Yeah.
a little threatening.
Yeah, he, like, screamed at her and, like...
First he was like, have sex with me, and then he was like, get the fuck out of my office.
He was, like, aggressively and then when she said no, he was like, get the fuck out. It was not nice. It was really...
a weird situation. So we can understand why she might be a little tipsy, but of
And then her
course...
feels.
Right. Seeing Ed sing that song just pushed her over the edge, because we all know that she cheated on him, and, well, he doesn't know about it, right?
Yeah, so she runs away to these random stairs in
Right.
like, the middle of some
Sort of
forest.
construction that was happening, like, on a school campus, and we see, caution tape right there, and of course we recognize that as the scene of the crime.
Right, because we see flashes
Throughout the entire season, of course. So
Jane runs after her, and then they sort of have this little
conversation.
About-
Madeline admits to her.
about the cheating.
Correct.
And then who runs down next? Is it Renata?
I believe next, that's interesting. So Renata, it is Renata.
She apologizes
to Jane.
Right.
She follows Jane, apologizes. That's where we get the "you're a very big person" line.
And I did try to gouge for his, in his defense.
I did try to catch your eye out. And then, of course, when Madeline's, like, apologizing and being that stereotypical crying drunk girl, Jane is like, she's a little...
And then I think Celeste must have seen the train happening, so she ran down, and then, of course, Perry being who he is.
Right, he follows directly after. And now this is a part that that is really interesting, because Bonnie, and honestly, we didn't learn the entire history of what went through Bonnie's mind in that moment until this very, very last episode that we watched in
Right.
season 2. And, Bonnie sees Perry, and you can see in her eyes that she knows what's happening. Like, you can
Right. A little bit before, Celeste and Perry were, I guess, like, arguing with each other, and Celeste was trying to get away, and Bonnie, like, was watching from the distance. And whenever she saw Celeste go down, and then she saw Perry follow her, that's when Bonnie decided to follow.
Right. And even in that moment, I think, even without all of the development that Bonnie's had in season 2, you could see that she recognizes abuse.
Right.
Zoe Kravitz was genius in the way she played that, and in the way they directed her too, because you didn't have to know everything we just learned about Bonnie to
Right.
know that this woman knows that something's wrong is happening.
Well, also the sheer fact that it was Bonnie who ended up being the person. She's the most hippie, the most, like, peace, love, calm yoga. Like,
Right.
she's the least likely person to, like,
Push
someone down the stairs.
Right.
And so the fact that she, could do that and was so, like, energized or like upset and like
Yeah.
triggered in a way that she, you know, was able to like. I mean, she saved their lives, but
She did.
it like does foreshadow a little bit. You know, there's obviously something else there.
Right. And what I want to bring about too is Jane earlier on in the episode tells that Max also pushed Sky down the stairs. So check that foreshadowing. Sky's Bonnie's daughter.
Right.
Right. So that's really interesting. It's like a very lightweight foreshadowing that you only kind of catch after you see it the second time. And so that's really interesting. Bonnie follows them, right? And she kind of watches the whole thing go down from afar.
Right.
Now, this next moment was fucking genius. Again, guys, reaction shots. The second Perry stops short, Jane looks at him, and then we finally understand the sequence of her running on the beach. She's trying to catch who this man is. It's like the search for her, trying to find out who her rapist was.
Right.
And the second she lands
The reason
her
she
eyes,
went to Monterey.
right. The second she lands eyes on Perry, we see just the sheer horror on her face. Perry sees the horror on her face because he knows. Madeline knows. And then all of a sudden, Celeste looks, she knows.
It's just
Renata has no idea what's going on, but she knows something's going on.
Right. Something like terrible.
Right.
And, you know, after they sort of all look at each other, Perry just
I mean, he asks Celeste to go home, but it's clear that he's not in his right mind. He's kind of like, honey, like, let's go home, let's go home.
Too.
And Celeste is like, no. And at this point, like, all women know what's going on because the way Celeste is saying no is obviously like, hard no, I'm scared, I'm gonna die. Like, you don't have to know. Renata didn't have to know that they had a history of abuse, and Renata didn't have to know that they just found out this guy raped Jane in order to know exactly what was about to happen. Now, the next scene, like, literally just comes. It was so hard to watch. And it was the one we were talking about earlier, where we kind of get to see the whole thing go down. Right? And, I mean, Perry beat the shit out of all of them.
Perry hit every single. We were like counting. We're like every single person went down.
Literally,
once.
at some point, Madeline comes back up. People come back up, but like he had his hands around Renata's throat at one point. Like,
right. And if I were Bonnie watching from a distance, I can't say that I wouldn't have done
the same thing.
Exact same thing.
Well, and that's the thing. Is like Perry's strong, right? The only person who had a chance was Bonnie.
She had momentum, and she was the only person that he didn't have, like, no...
He didn't have eyes on her. Right.
Yeah.
And let's talk about that sequence just a little bit. Like, one of the things that, like, really caught me is even as we, like, because one of our friends was watching, you know, she made the mistake of looking down at her phone, so we rewound it. And the one part where, I don't know who he hits exactly, but it's just a very high piano note, and you just see the waves crashing. Right? Like, it's like just the way they did that was so eerie. And then, of course, we don't know what actually happened, like, to make them lie. Like, we don't know how that went down until actually this last episode of season 2.
Right.
So we're basically left
wondering why they chose to lie. Like, why is there still an investigation? Just this, like, you understand what happened. Like, you're finally like, okay, like it's clear, but these women are still obviously, like, getting...
Right, they're still getting, like, investigated. They're still getting... I mean, they're still, you know, they're still sought after, basically, and the detective is not happy with the situation.
And I love how at the end they have them on the beach, and they show you just, like, following them around on the beach. They have you at a bird's eye, they have you all these different angles, and then they have you in a camera.
Right, in binoculars is what it looks like, because it's got two, right? And... yeah, and that's literally, and of course we know that that's Detective Quinlan.
You know, there's a PI, a personal investigator, someone watching, right?
Exactly, and you know, it's interesting because these women never were really friends before.
No.
And now all of a sudden they're on the beach together, and of course that's a red flag.
They used to be like bullied, so they didn't play together. Now they're all friends.
Right. So that's how we're left, you guys. And I mean, I guess let's just go ahead and dive into season 2 because it honestly feeds pretty much directly into that timeline, right? We're like literally in the aftermath now. It's after summer vacation. The one thing they didn't lie about that I kind of forgot about is no one lied about the fact that Perry was abusive.
Right.
Everyone told the truth about the fact that Perry was beating the shit out of him. Celeste did come out and say Perry did, had an abusive relationship with her. And the biggest lie was just the fact that he slipped.
Mm-hmm.
He slipped back. No one pushed him. He slipped
Right.
back. Right? And now in the aftermath of this, they're all kind of just trying to move on. And summer vacations happened, and Bonnie is the one that's having the hardest time. We find out at the beginning of this episode. And it's pretty early on in the season that we see her kind of teetering on the edge of telling the police the truth.
Right. They kind of just let the summer go. You don't really know what happened so much over the summer. You know that the women are friends, but you don't know exactly what they're up to or how often they spend time together. And then whenever the kids go to school, I think for second grade, right?
Mm-hmm.
Second grade, you see that the 5 women reunite, and you can tell that Bonnie's a little worse for wear and tear.
Mm-hmm. The makeup was great for Bonnie. She looks very just like, what do you want to say? Like, how do you even say that? She's just like, worn out.
Yeah, like she wasn't taking care of herself in the same way that she had been.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and then there's Mary Louise.
Oh God, the Meryl show begins, you guys.
New characters introduced.
Mary Louise, which we learn is the kid's grandma on Perry's side. So, she has come not just to help Celeste in the aftermath of Perry's death.
But
She's
also
come to find out
exactly what happened.
what happened
with
to her
Perry.
son.
Exactly, and their marriage too. I guess.
Right.
And
Oh yeah.
oh no, what I find funny is she immediately butts heads with Madeline. Which I'm not surprised, because Madeline is who she is, and she's very protective of her friends and Celeste. But
My favorite was the way they butt heads, though. Is like Mary Louise's thing is like small people are untrustworthy, and I'm over here like I'm tiny as fuck. What the fuck are you saying, Mary Louise? Like, what? How? What?
it's like, if that was a correlation line, it wouldn't be one. Like,
Right. But it's a funny dynamic to watch. But we definitely see that something's a little off with Mary Louise. As much as I can understand a grandmother's perspective, in the sense of like having that maternal instinct, in the sense of just wanting what's best for her kids, it's very clear that early on Mary Louise is not okay or even willing to halfway maybe sort of consider the fact that her son could also be an abusive person.
right.
To the point of raping a woman,
And
a stranger.
right, and beating his wife and causing his children to become, or one of his children to become, a bully.
Exactly. And it's very clear to us very early on that she very much is not okay with any of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nathan's interesting. He starts to really worry about Bonnie, which is something because Nathan's like one of the most worry-free characters in the show. I
Right.
feel like it goes like Nathan and then Gordon.
And of all people, he asks Ed to help him, which is like, what? Like, what? And Ed, of course, was like, no. Like, he was not about it. He was
Yeah.
sort of like Madeline about it, which I thought was funny, because Ed is like also like, he's just a good guy.
He's kind of starting to be done being a good guy
Right.
at this point.
He's sort of over it. I feel like he's like, I'm taking advantage of him and being an asshole now. But yeah, we see a lot of development with Madeline's family, with Abigail, who's deciding not to go to college.
And Madeline is livid about it because, of course, Madeline didn't go to college and wants her kid to do what she didn't do and have all the opportunities, etc., etc., etc. Which, I mean, has nothing to do with anything, because I'm sorry to you parents out there who still believe the college route is like the only way, best way to go. It's not. And especially not for someone like Abigail,
Right.
who's, much more on like the artistic, kind of free-spirited, entrepreneurial side than anything else, I think. But of course, we see that they start to clash about that.
Mm-hmm.
Now we meet another new character, Corey. Which, fun fact, guys, I have a friend that I work with that it was like he was like one of the last two to make it to the callbacks of this role. So if it hadn't been this guy that plays Corey, it would have been him, which is kind of cool to know.
It is awesome.
So Corey, he's a coworker of Jane's.
He's a little cutie.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not sure what to think of him right away because the first thing you see of him is he asks Jane about the Monterey Five or if she's part of the Monterey Five.
And you're just kind of like, whoa, man.
Well,
that's a lot to bring up on the first encounter.
right. And is it good or bad? Like, what does he mean by that?
Right. Well, and when we learn there's a Monterey Five,
Mm-hmm.
like we learn that that people are really talking, and I think that was the indication for Jane to tell the other girls, like, people are talking, like this is not just blowing over.
Right. Which leads them to wonder if the police are still
Right.
looking into their case.
Oh, and it's important to say that Jane tells the other women, not Bonnie. Bonnie is not a part of this conversation yet. And basically Renata, of course, the one who is very strong on keeping that pact. And, guys, I this whole season I've been contemplating why, and the only thing I can come up with is it's literally their motherfucking habit.
Mm-hmm.
It's habit. Like, it's fucked up, but it's habit. And we're gonna get to that when we talk about later episodes, because in later episodes we finally get to see into the conversation that went on before everybody gave their police reports.
Right. Just like in that moment, I guess, not thinking clearly, the idea of one of them being considered possibly as a murderer, but not even, it wouldn't have been murder, it would have been self-defense.
Correct. Because at that point they were all in need of it.
Was more frightening than just telling the truth. I don't know, I've thought about it too.
I have to, and maybe, and God, this is the craziest part of being an actor, because if I had to play one of these women, I would have to figure out that. Like, I would have to figure that riddle out. I really would, because I wouldn't be able to lie authentically and play that character authentically, if I didn't know. And that's the only thing, like, as an actress who would do this character work, that is the only thing I can think of, is, like, none of them wanted to be called a murderer. And now, of course, Bonnie, she wasn't actually in the fight. So would it have been self-defense for her? But even then, even if they all stuck with the story of Celeste pushed him down the stairs in self-defense, she would have walked free.
5 of her friends get punched in the face.
Seriously, though. Like, so, Renata, of course, is reassuring everybody the police have nothing.
And the way that it ends, this is like the beginning of the Mary Louise adventures. It, like, ends with Celeste, having nightmares about Perry and, like, screaming. I think, do you remember what she said, screaming? She was like...
Oh my god, no, I think she said, like,
kill.
I'm gonna kill you or something, and literally Mary Louise comes up, makes sure she's okay, and the first thing we see after Celeste wakes up is, okay, so who are you gonna kill?
Right, and it ends.
And that's the end. And you're just like, Mary Louise, Meryl Streep was coming in with the punch, you guys.
She was ready.
She's fucking ready. Well, alright, so... That's our last episode of season 1. That's our first episode of season 2. We're really excited to get into season 2, episode 2, because things only heat up. And
the relationships, and I would say in the first episode, all of the women are still pretty good with each other. Bonnie is a little bit funky. She's obviously, like, the one who's suffering the most from what happened, but so far, like, all of the relationships are pretty the same, I would say. There hasn't been a lot of, like, they're sort of building up what I think, like, structuring what the rest of the season is going to be with this episode, so it'll be exciting to go through the next few.
It will be. Now for our story time, we have a fun story. Do you want to tell it, Caitlin? Because I feel like it's more powerful from your perspective.
And for those of you who are going to listen to our story time, it is only available on audio, so check us out over there if you are
a YouTube watcher
or a story time lover.